Hello, career thought leaders. It is that time of year where we get to talk about the new trends and what is going on. It looks like we're not going to Facebook, even though I just took time to reload to Facebook, but that's all right. Hopefully, you're here on LinkedIn or YouTube and you're joining us. And we look forward to talking about the trends for 2026, what's coming up, and what do we need to know to share with our clients. So we do this every year and we look at the trends of what's coming. And as I was looking at this, it's our 15th year. So we started in 2010 doing an event that was then called Career Brainstorming Day. And we are all the way at 2025 talking about the new and the next in our trends. And what we like to do is do a little bit of kind of a meta analysis of what's going on in the world and what do we need to know in terms of how that applies to careers. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So say hello, let me know you're joining us. And as we go through these, let us know what trends are the most interesting to you, because we're going to spend time overview today, and then we're going to spend time deep diving into these trends over the next few weeks so that we can be ready for 2026. Kind of hard to believe, isn't it? We're coming to the end here of 2025 already. So I will be sharing some of the trends and then get your feedback, get your thoughts. So stay around and let's talk about what's going on in 2026. If you're here, whether you're watching the replay or joining live, also give people like what types of people you work with, what type of population you work with, because that can be helpful as we meet each other here in the comments and start to support each other. So as I said, we've been doing this since 2010. And so sometimes, if I'm honest, when I look at the trends, I think, oh my goodness, we've been talking about those. What's new? So that's what we're going to talk about today, actually, is what's new with these trends, because some of them have persisted or come back around, and we're talking about them still because they are still important. However, the framing of them or the way that they're implicating in terms of careers has changed, and that's what we want to pay attention to. So we have been talking about AI in hiring, AI in job search since 2019. I know, hard to believe, before ChatGPT. So actually our 2019 white paper and programs, we were talking about applicant tracking systems, of course, and video interviews, and how AI, believe it or not, was being used in those applicant tracking systems and other things way back, actually even before then, but way back before 2015. So today, what's different is that AI is really changing how people hire, and it's changing how people apply. And we know this, right? But it's a constant challenge because both parties are trying to figure out how to use AI in a way that helps. And both parties are trying to figure out what is the other person doing that we don't like in some ways, right? So job seekers don't like that recruiters are using AI, although I've got to tell you that the way they're adopting it is very different than what you hear in the popular media. Most of the time, they are not using it to screen people out or send you automated rejections. Those are largely overstated. And then recruiters are saying, well, we don't like job seekers using AI to do these things. And so this kind of battle, if you will, is creating challenges for both parties in the job search, for both parties in hiring. And this is what we're talking about now is, one, what do we need to know about both sides of this equation so that everybody can navigate it as well as possible? And we have Martin Redstone coming into Career Jam in a few weeks to give us the skinny on what's going on there. And also, we're talking to our clients about the human connection and the real way that hiring has always happened in terms of building relationships, building community, and making those connections. How do we do that in our materials? Because there's a human connection we can make in our resume that gets lost if we overuse AI. And then obviously, how can we do it in our job search? And it's not just about, networking. It's really about something bigger and longer term and deeper that counters the effects of AI, not just on the hiring process, but on our mental health, on all these other things that are a challenge when we start talking about the overuse of AI, our story, our confidence, the depth of what we do. So it's not just about, what are the latest trends and how AI is being implicated in hiring. It's yes, and there's some landmines to watch out for, which we've been talking about over the last few weeks. And then there's this understanding of the shift in what matters, and that it is very complex because yes, your human skills matter more, but your AI skills also matter more. And that's part of what we're going to dive a little deeper in. So if this trend is of interest to you, give it a shout out, give it a thumbs up. Yes, you want to hear more about AI and this dichotomy and how people navigate it. And then specifically, what areas do you want to know more about? Because I'll dive deeper. I love to do that. So give me some ideas of what you'd like to learn more about, and we'll share on it. So then the next thing is skills-based hiring, skills gaps, this mismatch that we have in the job market. This is also not new. It's been going on since 2015 as well, that the jobs that people have skills for don't match the jobs that are hiring. And there's a graphic from SHRM that shows this, and we'll look at it next week, that in this space, when you think about hiring, there are some companies, industries that are struggling to get qualified applicants while you're still seeing the huge surge of applicants. And sometimes it's not an either or. I think one of the huge lessons that I keep saying to myself, because people ask questions and it kind of brings it back up, this either or thinking, the black and white thinking, that is going to get us and our clients in trouble more and more as we move into 2026, because it is a both and. Yes, your clients should be applying online and they should be networking, right? The AI in the hiring process does not mean that applications are any less valuable, at least at this point. We'll keep a tab on that. Also means that yes, companies are flooded with applications, but that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone has enough people to fill their jobs. In fact, we're still seeing this gap. And this is what we want to help clients find so that they can plug in where people are missing skill sets. And how do we help them do that, especially our younger population? How do we help them pivot more quickly in these directions, but also think about long-term, they're probably going to have to pivot again. And what does that look like? And how do they build the skills to stay on top of those trends? And this is one of those areas that we've been talking about for a while. And Ann Nakaska is going to come in to talk about kind of this piece of it, but also how technology is changing jobs. Career folks need to get more plugged into industry. We need to understand what's going on in companies, in industry, and we need to care about that as well as our clients. And both of those things are a lot to hold, right? That's a lot to hold. Even if we are counselors at heart, I'm a trained counselor, that piece of it and wanting to help these people and manage their resilience and their mental health and all of that cannot be held in a vacuum apart from what's going on in industry, teaching people how to track trends in industry, and really giving more energy to engaging in that space, learning about it. I mean, it doesn't have to mean that you're going and doing tours of things, it's learning about it, making sure that we understand the needs of industry and the themes and threads in industry are just as important as our clients' interests and values and all those things. Because if we do that in a vacuum and the person can't find a job, their mental health is going to be negatively impacted regardless of all the work we might be doing to help them with that mental health work. So those two pieces have to be held together. And I've seen some amazing themes in our work right now along, trauma-informed care and mental health and all of that in the career space, which is so critical. But we can't lose sight of the industry and who's hiring and how do we help those two pieces connect? Because otherwise, I mean, it really doesn't matter if we're doing trauma-informed care if this person's unemployed for 2 years. That is not the holistic approach that we need to take. So maybe broadening our definition of holistic care to include that as well. Having to pivot again and again. Yeah. And Cheryl Minnick commented on one of our posts this morning, right? People are angry at this continuous sand eroding out from under us. And we want to help them with that. We want to, meet them where they're at. We want to acknowledge that and then help them gain the skills to look forward, to anticipate trends as much as possible. I'm not going to Pollyanna and say that we can make them never have that challenge again. But if we can help them understand how to look at what's happening and maybe even the shrink it down to what's going on locally, and then also pick your head up and look at what's going on globally. We don't have to know it all. That's why picking sectors or industries is so helpful, because then we can watch trends in those industries, probably more than one, so that we can make the changes when we need to. And those industries that we're paying attention to may shift as well. But you're focusing in on something so that you aren't trying to, boil the ocean. You're just trying to figure out what is going on here and how can I plug in the future? What skills do I need? How do I fill those skills gaps? And how do I meet that change? And we will look at some resilient sectors, although even this, when you do research, and I'm using tools to do this online research, it doesn't have the whole context, because here in the US, you might say, oh, healthcare is growing, but only until and if the administrations that are in charge keep healthcare funding. Because right now you're looking at policies that are set to cut hundreds of thousands of healthcare jobs if we have cuts in Medicaid. And, politically, maybe that needs to happen. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But what I do know is if they cut it, it will be hundreds of thousands of jobs. So you look long term and you say, yes, maybe long term there is going to be opportunities in healthcare, but that is going to fluctuate just like everything else. Nothing is a fail-safe. Nothing is windproof, if you will. We just had like hurricane force winds here yesterday, so that was on my mind. But we look for the gaps, we look at the trends, but we also try not to see anything as stable, because our world has removed that. And for most cases in most industries, that's not a thing. Stability is the skill sets that you need to anticipate and transition from one thing to the next. That is branding, that's market positioning, and that's, I wouldn't say market research, but being plugged into your industry so that you can see what's coming next, which kind of leads us to the next trend. And it's so funny whenever anybody talks about portfolio careers, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like when I started in this business in 2005, people were talking about portfolio careers. And so, how do we have this conversation in a way that is 2026, not 2006? That's what we need to be thinking about, because the same thoughts that we had about portfolio careers in 2005, those are not what's necessarily happening today in this time. So one of the interesting things about gig work or portfolio careers, side hustles, all of those things, is that the motivation for them on a large scale tends to go up and down. Not up and down, tends to go back and forth. So for a few years, people are motivated for these things because of they want to, or they want to learn the skills, they want to do those things. Then for a few years, it's very economic based. We need things. Sorry, everything just went black for a second. The general move towards side hustles, gig work, all of that has not changed. What has changed and what continues to change that we need to keep our eye on is, what does this really look like? So right now in 2026, poly working, having 2 jobs, having, agents or VAs that do a second job for you is mainly driven by economic pressures. And that's important for us to understand, because when someone's going to get a side hustle, they're not necessarily thinking about skills for long-term career growth. They're thinking about fill the income gap. And we can help them do that. We can help them research opportunities to do that. We have to be very careful and help them be very careful of scams, right? Those get money quick, get rich quick schemes. We've got to be careful of that. And that doesn't mean that some of those things aren't actually viable. We've got to balance maybe our assumptions on, like, can you really have a career doing crypto? Maybe we have negative or positive assumptions about some of these things with the reality and the research and their motivations. But what we know, of course, is that if someone is doing something to bring in some quick income, they either need something that is aligned with their skills, because you can demand a higher premium when it's aligned with your skills, or something that maybe kind of entry easy point. Like, I don't know, I'm going to give driving for Uber as an example, but there's lots of other options. The challenge here is that a lot of these opportunities have shifted, right? When you see Fiverr and a lot of those roles, people were using AI tools to do that instead of hiring those things out. However, you will still find areas of need in those arenas, because not everything can be done by AI agents, despite what the Facebook ads might tell you. And even if they are, sometimes some people, not everybody is doing that. And so you're going to need to go and find someone that can do things with AI skills, because no one wants to pay for you to do it manually anymore. That doesn't mean they won't pay you to do it, but you better prove to them that you're doing it the most efficient way and the most effective way using AI to do it, for the most part. Excellent. Balancing counseling with industry work. Yes. Favorite ways to keep pulse on the industry. Career Thought Leaders newsletter, which we will be moving more on our website so that it's easier to find back issues. But it's more about finding which types of industries and or geographic locations are most important to your clients, because just like we don't want them to try to boil the ocean, I really don't want you trying to boil the ocean either. And so thinking about what matters most to your clients, what industries do they tend to watch, what local geographies, and finding those resources that are credible in that area. If you're trying to look at big picture stuff, I do love McKinsey and Deloitte, and I watch some of those bigger picture things. However, it is really important to either do it yourself or help your clients, which I think this is a critical skill for our clients to do, is to seek out the resources in their industry, in their local area, that are going to be most relevant for them. So we're thinking about how do we identify those opportunities, and that it's not a failure to add something like this to your thought pattern. So we've talked to a lot of our coaches who are dealing with people who've been unemployed for a long time. And when they bring up this idea of, what can we do to get creative, they're surprised that the individuals don't see it as a negative. And that's good, because we're all going to have to be more creative long term. But this isn't just a stopgap while I find a job thing. I would think longer term with this, maybe you keep that side hustle going a little bit while you have your next job, because it's not going to last. It's not. And what are some of the things that we could do that would be sustainable, interesting, make extra money, right? Whatever fits their needs and values, and also fills a market gap, putting those two things together. So then we get into the idea of the remote and hybrid skills that we need to do work. And I think one of the most confusing things that has happened in the out there universe writing about careers right now is that people are using hybrid in two different ways, but it's hybrid work. But one hybrid work is people plus AI, which we are going to talk about more about that, how our are jobs changing because of AI, and how are the how are we using AI? I just, in our last newsletter, there's an article about that companies are going to have a new role called a moderator. And the moderator's job is going to be to manage the AI agents. So there's going to be somebody, not necessarily a software programmer, but someone who's skilled both in AI and in the content, so that they can manage the bots that are helping the company do their jobs. Very interesting idea that was in one of these articles. So you've got that hybrid that they're talking about, that you need human plus AI skills to do jobs. And then you've also got the other kind of hybrid, which is work from home, work from office. And I have to read the articles to understand which hybrid are we talking about today. And of course, work from home, hybrid work is again something we've been talking about since 2018. Even before COVID hit, this was a thing, right? But then, of course, in 2020, it became a much bigger conversation, and now it's like continued. It's the conversation that will not die, right? It just keeps big. We're just still trying to figure this out. And wrapped up in that conversation is this globalization conversation that it is critical for us to keep having with our clients. It is not a political conversation. It is an inevitable conversation that, with population shifts and with the way things are changing, we will be working with global teams. You will be working with people from all over the world. When you look at the population growth in South America and the Philippines and specific countries in Africa, Nigeria especially, there's just no around it that if you plan to work for 20 more years, you are going to be working with global teams. And so that conversation, hybrid back to office, what does that mean? What does that look like long term if we're talking about a larger portion of people in companies, especially, of course, global companies, but even more mid-sized companies as things evolve, are going to be other places in the world. The demographics just demand it. And so that piece of it is really important for us to keep talking about, even though like when I read it and it comes up as a trend, I kind of roll my eyes. Oh, we're still talking about this. But it's so much deeper than just where you work. It's who you work with, how you do the work, and how the work gets distributed across the company, across the globe, that's woven into this hybrid work from home, work from office conversation. So we'll keep talking about it, but with that new lens, because people are still trying to figure it out, and how we market ourselves, how we communicate, and especially for our young people, how they grow up in their careers is going to be shaped by this very foundational thing of where you work and how they handle that, how they navigate it, how they communicate, how they use their skills to make that happen. Niching down further, yes. It's so important for us a little bit, although I know we have to be a little bit more global, but then understanding how to quickly niche down industry, location, company, role, and having that framework so that we can help people from any of industry do their research. And a few weeks ago in our Friday conversation, we went through how to use deep research, and Gemini is my favorite. You can also do it in ChatGPT. You can do it in Perplexity, but your prompts are pretty limited in terms of numbers. So I tend to do it Gemini right now. I also love that Gemini creates visuals of your deep research when you're done. So we can use some of these tools if we keep that framework. And of course, we do the digging to find out and make sure the things are accurate. We don't have to know it all. We just have to know the process to do the research. So as we look at our 5 trends here, and we'll be talking about them deeper next week. Let me know what you want to dive deeper into. The other thing that we've got coming up here, the reason that we're talking about these trends is every year, like I said, we do our global event where we get together and we look at what's coming up with the trends. That is called Career Jam. And a whole bunch of you have grabbed the opportunity to join us for Career Jam through the the bundle that's going on today, which actually maybe I'll try and pull that up. Let's see if I can do it. And we have our bundle that ends today. It's all about how you stay on top of the trends, and it includes, you can do a little tiny upgrade and have the opportunity to join us for Career Jam. So on top of that, I'll pull this up first because it's what I have. We've got our Q&A, but it's all around trends this month. It's actually October 30th because Career Jam starts on November 1st. But this is an opportunity to come and chat about these trends instead of just listening live. So I'll put this link in there if you're interested in joining us for that. CTL RWA Logistics at logistics.com with the QA RSVP at the end. So that's an opportunity to come and open call and engage with us on these topics. I love doing those. I love having the conversation with you instead of just being here live. And that's one option for you to get engaged. And then the next one is Career Jam. If you're interested in joining us for that, we'd love to have you join us for that as well. And that is careertl.com/career jam. I will put that up here as well. So I love talking about these trends. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what more you'd like to chat about as we go through these top 6 trends. The first one being this new dichotomy and kind of the tension in AI in hiring between job seekers and recruiters. How do we navigate that? Then looking at the skills gaps and the high growth sectors. How do we help people find and transition into those? Looking at portfolio and gig careers with fresh eyes and new ideas. What does that look like? Then looking at how AI and technology more generally are infiltrating each job and the hybrid type of work where it's AI plus human. And what does that look like moving forward? And then the last one, the other kind of hybrid work where we're looking at global integrated systems. And what does that look like for companies? What does that look like for individuals in terms of work for office, work from home? But that is just the surface. We're really looking at how do you work? Who do you work with? And how do you advance and excel in that type of work? So those are our 5 mega trends for the upcoming year. And I look forward to your thoughts and questions or other areas you'd like to dive in deeper as we get ready for our Career Jam, which starts November 3rd. Technically goes through November 7th because we always have some folks from Australia that join us, and I'm sure they're going to want to join us for Martin Redstone, who is presenting that evening of the 6th here in the US, which would be the morning of the 7th in Australia. And if you have any questions about that event or thoughts, please feel free to ask so that we can make it the best that it can be for our annual trend event. Thank you, everyone, and we will see you next Tuesday to dive a little deeper into some of these trends.